Hello YouTube, this is Goddard Radio Mosky here again with another beer review for you today. For this one I'm going to do another Brewdog beer. I'm getting further through this stockpile that I've accumulated over the last little while, and this is my first porter in a long time actually. The last porter beer review I did for you was the Left Hand Brewing's Blackjack Porter, which was really good. But this is one of the Brewdog Prototype 2013 beers, and this is the Brixton Porter. I already reviewed the Hobo Pop for you, and I'll be doing the Interstellar one as my Brewdog video for tomorrow. And remember, you can go onto the Brewdog website and vote for these beers when you've tried them, and whichever one wins the voting scheme, if you like, will go on to be a member of the 2014 core range. The last ones from this year, they brought out Coco Psycho and Jackhammer, and they were the ones that were in the Prototype 2012 range, of course, there. But I did the Hobo Pop review for you already, so have a look at that, and then you can have a little look at Interstellar in the near future. But as is usual with my beer reviews, I'll just take you through a little bit of a history of the Brewdog Brewery. But as I always say, if you are just simply interested in the tasting of this beer, then feel free to go on towards the latter part of the video and you will catch that particular segment. But anyway, Brewdog were founded back in 2007, so they're just very close to celebrating their 7th birthday, of course, and they were founded by James Watt and Martin Dickey, both of whom were 24 years old at the time. I believe Martin Dickey is actually the head brewer at the brewery, but James Watt also does some brewing himself, I believe, and their first brewery was at the Keswick Industrial Estate in Fraserburgh in the very northeast of Scotland. For those of you who don't know the location of this, I always describe Scotland as looking a bit like a monster's head, mainly for the benefit of those of you watching outside of Scotland, of course, but Fraserburgh is right on the tip of the nose of the monster there. But Brewdog are very well known. They've actually put Scottish craft beer on the map of the world, if you like. They've really sort of brought it to the forefront in this way, but they're very well known as being an experimental brewery. A lot of different hop varieties, different malts, even some random ingredients thrown into their beers there, but they're a very, very good brewery, and probably one that you'll have heard of if you're into craft beer to any degree, of course. But they're very well known for their strong beers actually, and they produced the Tokyo Star in 2008, which there was actually a bit of a media storm surrounded this beer because many people in the Scottish media branded the pair as irresponsible for producing a beer that had an 18.2% ABV, just due to the fact that Scotland has a little bit of a binge drinking culture. But they've also produced the 32% Tactical Nuclear Penguin, the 41% Sink the Bismarck, and the 55% End of History, and these three beers were actually produced largely due to an ongoing feud, if you like, with Schwarzbrau in Germany. Both breweries wanted to hold the title of world's strongest beer, but they've actually both been beaten hands down by Brewmeister, another Scottish brewery based in Keith, who've produced beers at 65%, which was the Armageddon, and the 67% Snake Venom, of course, there. So I think this is very unlikely to be beaten in the near future as well. But they're also well known actually for allowing their fans to buy into the brewery. They've had 3 rounds of shareholding, the first of which allowed them to expand by 200% during the recession, which was 2009, I believe. Their second lot of funding, which I think was 2010 perhaps, and that allowed them to sort of fund their new brewery and things like that, which they moved into in 2012. It's in Ellon, which is closer to the city of Aberdeen in the northeast of the country, and very recently they closed the 3rd round of the Equity for Punks shareholding scheme, which allowed them to take £14 million, and they've said that they'll use this to expand their brew pub scene and indeed to expand the brewery itself. So you'll see a lot of good things coming from Brewdog recently. They'll expand their capacity quite a bit, but they'll probably use this to expand the core range of beers, if you like, and bring out lots of different beers rather than just brewing more of the same stuff, if you like. As I mentioned, a very cool and experimental brewery here. As I mentioned as well, they've got a lot of brew pubs all over the place now. The first of these opened in Aberdeen in 2010, in October 2010 I believe it was, and in 2011 they expanded this down to Glasgow and Edinburgh in Scotland, and also opened a site in Camden in London, and in 2012 they actually expanded this further into London. New sites in Nottingham, Leeds, Manchester, Newcastle, Bristol, Birmingham, and also another one in Shoreditch in London there. And this was the year actually that they moved their production from the Fraserburgh facility to the Ellon facility. However, that Fraserburgh facility actually remains as their beer lab and where they brew a lot of the high-end stuff. So this is where your Sink the Bismarcks and things like that come from. But today they are actually the largest independently owned brewery in Scotland. Actually, they produce 120,000 bottles of beer per month for export all across the world. You're talking all throughout Europe, the Far East, Australia, North America, South America, pretty much anywhere you can get these beers now. I believe South Africa's actually taken them as well now. But to tell you a little bit more about the recent events at the brewery, they've actually just about released some very new beers. They released the Moshi Moshi 15, which has been released to celebrate the 15th birthday of Moshi Moshi Records. This one is a 5.2% pale ale with some nice biscuity and caramel malt bases, and also Columbus and Centennial hops. And just going back a little bit as well, it was quite funny because there was a Chinese rip-off of the Brewdog bars, and they were selling a beer called Funk IPA, and James Watt actually wrote a bit of an open letter to them, and they just said basically that they were more flattered that someone had gone to the trouble of actually producing a fake Brewdog bar. They thought it just kind of showed how well they were doing their beer and things like that, but they weren't going to try and sue them and anything. And I mean, this is something that's getting quite bad in China. The Chinese are sort of stealing a lot of things from the West, and the Chinese government, when people go to sue them for it, they just say, oh no, that's not the same, when it obviously is the same. So they probably wouldn't have got anywhere with that anyway. But they've just released a couple of new beers recently as well, apart from that Moshi Moshi 15. This is the 2013 prototype range, as I mentioned. This was originally intended to have 4 beers. The one that's missing is the Armory, which was a black lager. That one apparently didn't turn out very well. So the 3 in the prototype range, as I mentioned earlier, you have the Hobo Pop, which is an American wheat ale with rye. This is the one I've reviewed for you already. You have Interstellar, which is the one I will review for you tomorrow. That's a red rye IPA. And of course you have this one, which is the Brixton Porter here as well. And they're actually looking at some new locations for brew pubs as well. This is the other big event that's going to happen in 2014. They've concluded sites in Sao Paulo in Brazil, Tokyo in Japan, Berlin in Germany, and also Rome and Florence in Italy. And they're looking at sites in Brussels in Belgium, Paris in France, Barcelona in Spain, and also a number of US states for the locations for these beer pubs as well. And they're also looking at Canada as well. I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking at Australia in the near future, but you can actually go onto their website and ask them to have a look at locations and things like that. And obviously if they get a high enough demand from people writing this in their website, they will look at it. As I mentioned, this brewery is really good for listening to their fans actually. If people tell them, oh, you've not done this type of beer for a while, they will listen to you. And if there's a beer you really like that was an occasional brew, they tend to bring it back if they get enough people asking for it, of course. I'm claiming for 77 Lager. I'd really love them to bring that back, incidentally. But anyway, let's move on to the actual tasting of this beer itself. Now this one is the Brixton Porter. It's a 5% session porter. It's malted with extra pale, dark crystal and black malts with roasted barley, and it's also hopped with Victoria's Secret hops, Bramling Cross and Challenger hops, of course. This one was actually intended to go along with the opening of the new, or it was intended to be new, Brixton brew pub down in England, but the deal for that fell through at the last minute. But they decided they wanted to brew the beer anyway, and the only other porter I can think of that they've actually done is Alice Porter, and I haven't tried that one yet actually, so I can't really give you a comparison. But anyway, as you can see, this is one of the experimental or prototype range, if you like. So let's see how we get on with this guy here. The actual product description that was on the website for this one in the article, this says, a recipe we originally devised to celebrate the opening Brewdog Brixton in the city that gave birth to the porter style. Unfortunately the deal for the site fell through at the last minute, but we still wanted to make the beer. Brixton Porter is a delightfully decadent yet eminently drinkable dark beer. This is just basically what I mentioned to you there, of course. But let's get this guy out and get on with the tasting. As I mentioned, it's a 5% porter. These ones actually don't have blurbs on them, of course, as well. The experimental beers, you don't get the usual sort of crazy blurb, if you like, on the side of the bottle there. But as you can see, just a little bit of smoke coming off this one here. I'm quite interested to do a dark beer. I've not had a dark beer in quite a while, actually. But let's get this guy out and see how we get on here. Sugar up the last little bit, try and get a nice bit of head on it here. As you can see, they're pretty much a pitch black beer, of course there. Even if I shine this up to the light for you there, no light coming through that at all. A very dark sort of coffee-ish colour there. Can't see anything through that at all, no light at all. But this has got a nice sort of tan head on it. That's just kind of fading. It's about a half finger, but that is just fading very quickly to a very sort of thin foamy layer, if you like. Some big bubbles in there as well. But definitely there is maybe just a little bit of visible carbonation. You can see it coming up the sides to the top, to the bottom of the head there, but you can't really see very much with this beer at all. But it should be quite smooth considering it's a porter. But in terms of the aroma here, let's give this guy a smell. A lot of roasted caramel, malts, if you like, here, which is what you would expect from the porter. There's a good bit of sort of coffee as well, maybe a hint of chocolate too. The chocolate is sort of mixed in very well with the coffee, I would say. It's got a bit of a bready note too, and there is actually some sort of kind of Rauch beer smoke to this one, if you like. It's a very interesting smell, this one. I actually really like the smell of dark beers like porters, of course, and stouts as well. But yeah, it smells like a typical porter. You've got the nice roasted caramel malts there with a kind of big bready note as well, and actually a little bit of smoky character to there. A really nice one actually. As I say, I really like the smell of porter beers, but let's give this guy a taste and see how we get on here. It's actually quite well carbonated on first taste. You feel that coming in there. This is probably the idea. This makes it quite crisp, to be honest. It's actually quite a well balanced flavour one actually. You're getting big roasted malts there. As I mentioned, that smoky kind of ashy character is in the background, and that seems to be lingering through on first taste. Let's give this guy a gulp and get the more sort of sensitive taste buds, if you like. Yeah, you're getting, if you gulp it, you're getting more of the sort of coffee and kind of chocolatey notes there. The main thing you're getting, if you're just sipping it away, is the sort of smoky bit in the background there. The caramel is actually quite subdued. It is mainly the chocolate and coffee notes that are coming out here with the smokiness. But yeah, it's quite well balanced, and I can see what they're going for with the sort of drinkability of the porter. It's quite well carbonated, and that's obviously making it quite crisp. It's got quite a nice wet mouthfeel, to be honest with you. This is quite an interesting one. Usually I'm used to porters being a bit thicker and a bit more syrupy with this, but this is obviously, like I say, they're wanting a sessionable porter that you can drink a few of. But yeah, this is actually really nice. It's a really well balanced beer. There's maybe a little hint of nutty character in this one as well. Perhaps also a little bit of sort of charred wood, if you like, but mixing in with the smoke there, it does have some sort of woody and maybe leathery character to it as well. But as I was mentioning, it's the sort of smoke that's lingering in the back with this one. If you gulp it, you're getting more of the coffee and chocolate notes there. So just if you just try and linger this in your mouth, just try and drink it in a few different ways, and you'll bring out the different flavours here. But yeah, definitely big roasted malts, a little bit smoky in the background, as I say, with some coffee and chocolate, and the caramel is actually very subdued in this. I'm just trying to pick it up because I can definitely smell some caramel in there. There is just a little hint of kind of caramel sweetness in the middle, but really pushed back by the sort of coffee notes there. The coffee is the one that's kind of giving a lot of the bitterness in this beer, but in terms of the mouthfeel here, definitely mid-bodied. The carbonation does make it quite crisp actually. It's a very wet mouthfeel, and it's actually surprisingly thin. I would usually describe a porter as being full-bodied, but this is more of something that's sitting on the mid-bodied range, definitely. But this is what they're going for, a sessionable porter. But yeah, interesting, like I say, quite thin for a porter, but this is the idea that they're going for, and you have that nice smoky and woody element to it as well. This is a nice one, but it's quite unusual in the sense, I think this is one you kind of need to get used to a little bit. And I can see if you were having a session of these, if you had one or two of these, I can see how you would get used to it a little bit more. But it's unusual to have a porter that is so sessionable, really, to be honest with you. But this is, like I say, this is what they're going for. But definitely in terms of the flavours, as I mentioned, it's quite well balanced. You've got big roasted malts, the smokiness being the thing that kind of comes in the background a bit more, and if you gulp it in, you're getting sort of the chocolate and the nice sort of chocolate and coffee notes coming out a little bit more, but it's definitely the smoky character that's in the background there, and the coffee seems to be pushing back the caramel malts, if you like, a bit, and there is a nice underlying woody character to it, and it's actually just a tad earthy, to be honest, as well. But really it's the roasty character that's kind of setting this one alight, if you like. It does have a little bit of a bitter kick to it on the finish, but in terms of the mouthfeel, like I say, mid-bodied, quite a high little bit of carbonation, makes it quite crisp, and quite a wet mouthfeel too. It is just a little bit smooth, but it's mainly more of a crisp beer in my opinion. Sessionable porter, like they're going for. Again, this is one thing where they've aimed for the style quite well, and they've aimed for the style and done it very well, my apologies. But yeah, this is an interesting one, but I hope you found this beer review informative here. I've just looked at the flavours, kind of told you a little bit about the beer, but tomorrow when I do the Interstellar, I'll maybe give a little bit of an opinion on the actual all three of them and which one I would vote for. I might do a separate video on that actually, if I'm honest. I'll think about that tomorrow and see what I think. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. If you've tried this one, as I always say, please let me know in the comments section your own thoughts on this beer. You'll find the links to my other Brewdog beer reviews in the video description as well, so if you're particularly interested in Brewdog beer, please consider subscribing. There's a lot more of these beer reviews to come, and I've already done a lot of them as well, so check those out. But thanks again for watching my beer reviews. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff you've been watching. Goddard Radio Moscow, many more Brewdogs to come, and also many other random beers for you to come as well. I hope you're enjoying your new year. Cheers.